go. Hello, welcome to Just Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. Welcome to the update for the Fyreslayers. Okay, and it's not as exciting as maybe the update for Deepkin, because it seems like everything has got maybe a little bit worse. Don't forget, we are waiting for the new book to be released, the Fyreslayers. But yes, Games Workshop haven't announced it, but it's quite clear that it is on the way. There is the new character, the Flame Master, or whatever he's called, or Flame Keeper, from the FOMO box that's been released, the Fury of the Deep. And he does seem to interact quite well with the updates they've made to the new book. As always, thank you to AOS Coach for providing the graphics for us. You get them early, so we don't have to. That's actually two things at once there. That's great. Okay, so they've updated. We've talked about the character already on a previous video. Go back and watch that. Now we're going to talk about the 3 War Scroll changes that they've put inside of this FOMO box. Okay, Hearthguard Berserkers, Auric Hearthguard, and Volcanic Berserkers. Well, how were they used previously? In most competitive Age of Sigmar 3 lists, we saw units of Hearthguard Berserkers, sometimes 3 10s. They come in units of 5, so sometimes it was 3 10s, sometimes it was a 10, a 10, and a 5, and then it would normally have a cast of characters. A Battlesmith, normally someone on a Magmadroth, mainly looking to give that +1 to hit aura out, that +1 to wound, that -1 to wound aura out as well, to make them as tanky as possible, would be generally what we'd see, and then you would see them have an attrition fight in the middle of the board. Yeah, the stats you can go and find on wargamer.com, thanks to Ziggy and the team, was that they had a 48% win rate, and they were like 2.2% of the meta. Okay, so like, you know, not too bad, right? None of these things that we're seeing here though seem like buffs. Might be the big problem for people going forward. Yeah, cheeky 30 minutes, roughly. Hearthguard Berserkers have lost, well, they haven't lost. They have always kind of had a 4-up ward, because effectively it started with a 6-up ward, and if they were within, not wholly within, 10 inches of a character, they effectively got to add +2 to that roll. So it became a 4-up ward, simply. That's changed now, so you have to be wholly within 9 inches of a Fyreslayers hero. That's actually a huge downgrade, because it means they don't just get a flat 6-up ward anyway. So if all the characters are dead, which we'll get onto in a minute, is an issue. They were always really difficult to kill, though, the characters, because the Auric Hearthguard. So you would... like, this is much harder to achieve now, because you've got to be wholly within 9. It's a slow army, and most of the time, your Hearthguard Berserkers are going to be charging at your opponent, and you're going to want that ward, most importantly, while you're in combat. So they're going to be running forward, charging, and then potentially getting themselves out of range. So it's much harder to do. So the army hasn't, like, so the unit's power level hasn't changed. It's been more hard. It's been more difficult to achieve, basically. So yeah, not the best. Not the best. But they've all got throwing axes. They used to be 5 and 5s, 1 shot each, and they've all gone to 4s and 4s. It's a nice uptick in output, I guess. Not particularly heavy. So Hearthguard Berserkers, the same. They've gone up 10 points for the privilege, and more difficult to use. Okay, Auric Hearthguard. Okay, they got +1 to their bravery, which is genuinely the best bit about the update for them. Their throwing axes also 5s and 5s to 4s and 4s. Now, their magma pikes, which are a shooting weapon, because they're kind of a shooting unit, have gone, and they come in units of 5, has gained rend in combat, which you often don't want rend on your shooting units, because you don't want them to be rend in combat on your shooting units, because you kind of want them to be shooting, not fighting, I guess. But it means that they can kind of do both, which is kind of cool, if you're excited. Now, the Molten Rock Bolts was a really good little ability, and we talked about this a lot at the start of Age of Sigmar 3, because it added +1 damage against monsters. So it's like 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 1. But if you're shooting monsters, it would be damage 2, which was really exciting. And you would half their movement, right? Really exciting, like really fun. Because it actually put like a monster hunting unit inside the game. It wasn't just seas of just the same combat unit, but with a slightly different buff. Instead, you had a piece that was good against another piece, and then you could kind of create some sort of strategy-based game where if something was more prevalent, you could take the other thing, and like, do you know what I mean? Like it kind of felt like there was a role. That's the word, a role. But they've lost that, so no longer do they do that. And they've changed halving the movement to you need 6s to proc halving a movement down. to half range. Also, massive shout out to my big friend, not big, a good friend of mine, Velatron in the chat. Love you loads. So they've taken that away from them, or they do half the movement when you proc any 6s to hit by 1 to half. So basically, any 6s to hit will reduce the movement of the unit you're shooting down by 1, but stop when you get to half range. Okay. Sorry, when you get to half, rounding up, of their movement characteristics. You can never go below half. So it means it's actually harder to do against units with monsters with more movement. So your Archeons, not you'll see it much anymore, but your Kings on Terrorgeist, let's say, whatever, it's harder to reduce their movement down, right? So, and then maybe the biggest news is that's going to hurt them Giants big time. Oh yeah, it's gonna really affect them. As they're already stood in the middle of the board. And then the big thing is that they lost the Bodyguard Rule. Now, Fyreslayers as an army traditionally have defended their characters pretty seriously, and most Fyreslayers armies had a cast of characters in their lists, many of which you can go find on the Wargamer.com in the stats, because they gave out such great buffs. +1 to save, -1 to wound aura, loads of different bits, right? They were so useful like to have in your army. But you would have a unit of Auric Hearthguard because they're fairly cheap. They got 5 points cheaper in this update because then they could bodyguard save, i.e. when wounds were done to the characters, you could pass them off to the Auric Hearthguard. Very much like Saurus Guard do for Slans in the Seraphon army. They've lost that ability, which is pretty bad, truthfully. Because now those characters are susceptible. And as we know, with the points update for Idoneth Deepkin, as we've seen previously, as well as the obviously good Sentinels, Blitzbarb Archers, and now Reavers are all 175 points, and they'll make it into every list. I'm pretty certain I'll see an equal amount of Reavers and Blitzbarb Archers as I will see Sentinels in the rest of Age of Sigmar 3.1 until we get the update. Good morning, Borbo, in the chat. Which does mean danger for those new Fyreslayer characters, in my opinion. So this is pretty bad. Now, finally, Volcanic Berserkers. Now, they've had a kind of change. A War Scroll's been split out. You can either have 2 hand axes, or you can have a hand axe and a sling shield. So they're either 160 points for 2 hand axes, or 170 points for hand axe and shield. Okay? Now, if you've got hand axe and shield, you've only got 1 attack as opposed to 2 attacks if you've got 2 hand axes. If you get charged, yeah, they've got a rule called Whirlwind of Destruction, which gives you +1 attack in melee, which is, sorry, that's only if you've got the 2 hand axes, right? If it charged. So if you charge, not if you were charged, sorry, if you charge, you get +1 attack. So that goes up to 3 attacks each. So 30 attacks from a unit of 10. Although there's a problem with that. They're on 32 mil bases, and because of coherency, you probably aren't going to get the back 5 to attack because they've only got 1-inch range on their weapons. Unlike Thralls, who got an update in this. It's like they wrote them at the same time, but somehow didn't write them at the same time because they were like, okay, boys, sign off on this. There's only 6 things here. No, that's not true. That's a lie. There's 8. Thralls have got 2-inch reach. People are complaining about that. Do you reckon we should give the Volcanic Berserkers 2-inch reach on the weapons? I don't think that's going to work. It's not going to work. I don't agree with that. So, nope. They can just have that front rank fight. That's all we're doing on those. So you might not want to do the 2 hand weapons because you can't maximize your output. Not that the output is particularly good anyway. Don't forget they're 2 wounds each, which is quite nice with a base up, 5 up save. So for 160 points, you're going to get 20 wounds with a 5 up save. I quite like that. I think that's quite good. What you really want to do is have them with the shields because that gives them a save characteristic of 4+. So for 170 points, you've got 20 wounds with a 4-up characteristic, meaning you can have +1 to their armor save, giving them a 3-up save. And honestly, for 170 points, 20 wounds with a 3-up armor save isn't a bad shout, especially as that keys in so nicely with the new character inside the FOMO box. Because anytime a model dies within 9 inches of him, he gets to add 1 to his stack. So when you do finally charge in your Hearthguard Berserkers later, they can add +1 attack to their damage. They could charge in your opponent's charge phase or any of those other things, which are genuinely good upgrades. So the character is a good upgrade for the Fyreslayers army, although that character is probably going to die to Sentinels now because they've changed the Auric Hearthguard rule. And that's all of the changes. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for listening to us, Wargamer. See you guys soon.